started right now.
Okay. You're up next, so just take it with you. Yeah, so you're next. Take it with you, and then I can leave it here, you can take it with you. Yeah, exactly. After Timmy, she's gonna read this. She's gonna read this song. It's gonna be you. It's Kristen. It's also. So just take it with you.
All right, at this time, if we can, we'll go ahead and get everybody seated so we can start the service.
Okay, let's just go sit down. Henry, you want to please? Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us to memorialize our daughter Victoria Elizabeth. It means so much to us that so many of our loved ones are here today, both in person and online. They say that you know who your real friends are when you go through bad times. 2020 has been a bad time for us and has shown us that we are very supported by so many people. Thank you for the support. Everyone says that the loss of a child is something that you never get over. Some people think that this only refers to a baby that you have met and held. From a mother who has lost 3 children, all before they were born, the most recent and difficult, of course, being Victoria, I can say that there is always pain associated with the loss. You always think about what the baby would have been like, who they would have grown into, what their life would have been like, and how your life and your other children's lives would have been different if they had come into the world as originally planned. Thus, part of this service today will be about feelings of what might have been, while the rest of the service will be about saying our goodbyes to our beautiful baby girl. After I gave birth to Benjamin and Victoria in March, we were introduced to Heartstrings, the hospital's bereavement service for parents. They offered us various support options and even gifts to help ease the blow of our loss. One gift was this pink teddy bear down here, with the idea that no parent should ever go home from the hospital empty-handed. Another gift was this book, Wherever You Go, My Love Will Find You, by Nancy Tillman. I would like to read this book to our beloved Victoria, as it signifies how I feel in so many ways. I wanted you more than you will ever know, so I send love to follow wherever you go. It's high as you wish it, it's quick as an elf. You'll never outgrow it. It stretches itself. So climb any mountain, climb up to the sky. My love will find you, my love can fly. Make a big splash, go out on a limb. My love will find you, my love can swim. It never gets lost, never fades, never ends. If you're working, or playing, or sitting with friends. You can dance till you're dizzy, paint till you're blue. There's no place, not one, that my love can't find you. And if someday you're lonely, or someday you're sad, or you strike out at baseball, or think you've been bad, just lift up your face, feel a wind in your hair. That's me, my sweet baby, my love is right there. In the green of the grass, in the smell of the sea, in the clouds floating by, at the top of a tree. In the sound crickets make at the end of the day, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, they all say. My love is so high and so wide and so deep, it's always right there, even when you're asleep. So hold your head high and don't be afraid to march to the front of your own parade. If you're still my small babe or you're all the way grown, my promise to you is you're never alone. You are my angel, my darling, my star, and my love will find you wherever you are.
Powering on. Target.
He's the half that makes you whole. cry for me, Daddy, my forever child. Don't cry for me, Daddy. I am right here. Although you can't see me, I see your tears. I visit you often. I go to work with you each day. And when it's time for you to close your eyes, on your pillow is where I lay. I hold your hand and stroke your hair and whisper in your ear, if you're sad today, Daddy, remember, I'm here. God took me home, this we know is true, but you'll always be my daddy, even though I'm not with you. We will never be apart, for every time you think of me, please know I'm in your heart.
A poem, What Makes a Mother? I thought of you and closed my eyes and prayed to God today. I asked, what makes a mother? And I know I heard him say, a mother has a baby, this we know is true. But God, can you be a mother when your baby's not with you? Yes, you can, he replied, with confidence in his voice. I give many women babies, but when they leave, it is not their choice. Some I send for a lifetime, and others for the day. And some I send to fill your womb, but there's no need to stay. I just don't understand this, God. I want my baby here. He took a breath and cleared his throat, and then I saw a tear. I wish I could show you what your child is doing here. If you could see your child smile with other children and say, we go to earth to learn our lessons of love and life and fear. But my mommy loved me so much, I got to come straight here. I feel so lucky to have a mom who had so much love for me. I learned my lessons very quickly. My mommy set me free. I miss my mommy oh so much, but I visit her each day. When she goes to sleep, on her pillow is where I lay. I stroke her hair and I kiss her cheek and whisper in her ear, Mommy, please don't be sad today. I'm your baby and I am here. So you see, my dear sweet one, your children are okay. Your babies are here in my home, and this is where they'll stay. They'll wait for you with me until your lessons there are through, and on the day that you come home, they'll be at the gates waiting for you. So now you see what makes a mother. It's the feeling in your heart. It's the love you had so much of right from the very start.
Still got your number in my phone. Even though you don't know and listen, I still call and wait till the tone. Just to hear you say leave a message. Since you've been gone, I've had to find different ways to grieve. There's days that I don't even want it on my mind. But tonight I'm weak, so I'm gonna pull out pictures, ones with you and laugh and cry. pictures, homes with you in 'em. Laugh and cry a little while reminiscing by myself. I can't help it, all I think about it is how you were taken way too soon. It ain't the same here without you. I gotta say, missing comes in waves. But tonight I'm drowning. Yeah, tonight I'm drowning.
I need a few of these. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for attending, either virtually or here in person. I know that it must feel strange attending a funeral for someone you have never met. I have only ever been to one funeral service in my life, and that was for my Uncle Cyril and his daughter Daphne Farquharson in Holland, who sadly enough passed away 12 years ago today. I still vividly remember the pain I felt when I heard the news 2 full days later. I was in Egypt at the time on a once-in-a-lifetime tour of the Middle East. I remember my journey from Luxor to Cairo, back to Cairo, how I had to wait a day to get a flight to Holland, and of course the funeral service. A lot of that still feels like a blur, especially the service. I don't remember what was said about Cyril or Daph's, perhaps because the pain of the loss made it harder for me to remember. But I remember the feeling of being there, of walking their casket to the crematorium. I remember their caskets being lowered out of view as we said our final goodbye. The feeling from that experience is still with me today. It wasn't until some time after that I learned about how my mother found out about Cyril and Daph's death. Uncle Derek found out first and told my sister, and they both went to go pick up my mom from work. They told me they approached her in the hall of the hospital. As soon as my mom saw them and the tears in my sister's eyes, she immediately became hysterical. She instantly thought it was me who had died. When my sister told her that I was okay and that it was her brother and niece who had died, she must have felt some fleeting relief knowing that I was okay, followed by immense pain knowing that she would never talk to her brother again and never see Daphne grow up to be an independent woman. When I heard this story for the first time, it never occurred to me that my mom would instantly think of her son as the one who died. A mother's love for her children is one of the strongest things in the world. It made me cry the first time I heard that, since I felt that I caused the pain. I tell you this since I learned a lot about what is said and remembered at a funeral versus how we remember the feeling. Each person attending experiences and remembers things different. I know what I remember and what I learned about the power of a mother's love for her children and how that never goes away. At Cyril and Daphne's funeral, almost everyone there knew them, had experiences with them, and can think of moments they spent together. Sadly, that is not the case with our daughter. No one here but my wife and I got to see her, to hold her hand, to sing to her, and tell her how much we loved her. I know that her death was our decision, and some may wonder why go through all this trouble to have a ceremony to commemorate the loss we caused, especially nearly 6 months later. To quote Abraham Lincoln, the world will little note nor long remember what we say here. So why have this funeral or ceremony for them then? The simple, funerals are never for the dead, they are for the living. A chance for those still here to express their feelings, emotions, and memories that we have experienced with the ones who have passed. Sadly, our daughter Victoria Elizabeth Nash never took a breath or opened her eyes, so does that mean she never lived? How can I talk about her life if she never really lived? So what I'll do instead is tell her story, and each and everyone here can answer the question if she really lived. Like all stories, the impressions and feelings the listener will experience will depend on the point of view the story is being told from and how they might relate to the storyteller. This story will be told from my point of view, a father who is certainly analytical in nature, a trained engineer who can't help but deal with matters in an objective way. Some problems, however, as you'll see, don't have an objective answer, and only a subjective one will do. It is hard to know exactly where her story begins. The objective answer to that is simple, but I feel like there was a part of her before that. Tammy and I spoke of possibly wanting 3 kids. Tammy is one of 4, and I am one of 3. We liked the idea of 3 kids, but as we got older and were having trouble just having one, we thought that would never happen. When Tammy was pregnant with Henry, we decided that we would name our first child after the kings and queens of England, since we were living there at the time. If it was a boy, it would be Henry Edward Nash, and a girl, Victoria Elizabeth Nash. I certainly wanted a boy first, but deep down, I liked the name Victoria Elizabeth better. It was stronger. Women are always stronger, and represent the 2 longest reigning monarchs in the UK. I knew that our first girl would be called Victoria Elizabeth Nash. After having Henry, Tammy and I hoped that we would have the next one close in age to Henry. My sister and I are only 14 months apart, and some would say that's too close in age. Tammy's 3 years apart from her next sister, so we hope for 1.5 to 2 years apart. People say men don't have a biological clock, but I'll tell you, being analytical in nature, I certainly do the calculations on the back end. Meaning, how old will I be when my children are this age? Thus, I really hope for us to have 3 kids prior to me turning 40. Although on the dawn of my 40th birthday, it doesn't seem to matter now. I had just turned 37 when we had Henry, so when we had another miscarriage, I just figured it wasn't to be at that point, and just hoped that we could give Henry another sibling. Boy, did things change after the first ultrasound, when we learned that Tammy was pregnant again. I remember that day well. We had come to hate ultrasounds, since that was always how we found out that the babies had miscarried. Every ultrasound I went to, I felt powerless to do anything, and just prayed for a beating heart. So when Tammy had sat down and the tech put the probe on her belly, I quickly looked for the black spot that showed she was pregnant and had a beating heart. During the ultrasound, the tech found the baby, examined it, took measurements, and showed us the heart beating already. She said, "Congratulations, you are pregnant, and everything looks good." We felt so relieved and just watched on the monitor. And then Tammy looked up on the screen and said, "What is that black spot up there?" The technician said, "Let me see," and moved the probe around to get a better view. "Oh," she said, "that is another one. Looks like you were pregnant with twins." We were both shocked, and after the thought settled in, we quickly became excited just thinking about having twins. They would all be close in age and would be like a little gang, and she would have had 2 brothers to protect her. Oh, and of course I would have had 3 kids before 40. Tammy and I felt special and unique, like we would be those parents with twins, like we were the select few who got to experience the joy and pain of having twins. Sadly, we had no idea how unique we would be. A month went by after the appointment, and we were still excited about the thought of having 2 at once. We discussed the obvious things, such as where will they both sleep, how will we feed them, how can we afford this if Tammy has to quit her job, etc., etc. We decided to just see how things go and not make any plans. We hoped Tammy could enjoy this pregnancy more than Henry's. Since Tammy was having twins, she started to see the prenatal doctor instead of a normal doctor. The first appointment went fine, but I clearly remember the discussion on the statistics. Being an engineer, this topic was designed for me. The doctor told us about the percentages of patients who are pregnant with twins that actually deliver 2 healthy babies. It was then that I first learned the difference between a viable life and a healthy life for a baby. 30 was the number that he told us to set as a goal. Since you can get past that, the statistics are in your favor. So that number stuck in my head like glue, and each day that passed brought us closer to it. At first I thought, okay, we can do this since everything seemed okay. All of Tammy's blood tests to check for the baby's health came back okay. No genetic disorders were pregnant, or so we thought. Then came our next appointment with a prenatal doctor. During the ultrasound, the tech finished her examination, but we could just tell something was up. The doctor came in and told us that one of the babies had a small fluid sac on the neck and a dilated kidney. We still didn't want to know the sacs at this point, so the baby was just referred to as baby A. My first thought was that it can't be that bad, and the baby is still developing, so maybe it'll just go away. Plus I thought, well, it can't be genetic since Tammy's blood test came back okay. But we could tell from the doctor that he was concerned, so he suggested going to the main hospital at the follow-up appointment in 2 weeks and asked us to consider an amniocentesis at that point. For those who don't know, an amniocentesis is where they use a needle to remove amniotic fluid from the sac, and is the most definitive way to check for abnormalities in the fetus, since it is tested with actual cells from the fetus. However, the risk is miscarriage, and that risk increases with twins. The blood test is much less accurate, and is particularly inaccurate when it comes to twins, as we painfully learned. So, while waiting for the appointment, I did what any normal engineer would do with a problem they didn't understand. I researched it and tried to find a solution. Take it from me, researching possible afflictions your unborn child may have is not something that stops you from worrying. I couldn't help it though. It was in my nature, and I needed to know more about what could be causing these issues to appear. When the appointment came, Tammy and I decided to go ahead with the amnio on the one baby. The ultrasound showed that the sac on the neck and the dilated kidney were still there. However, we wanted to know the sex of both babies first. This way, if anything happened, at least to me, they felt more like our children. Sadly, both were still there, and the dilated kidney was larger when the technician looked, and so she told us the sex shortly after. One boy and one girl, the perfect gift for many parents, and the girl was the one with the issues. When the doctor came, he asked if we were ready for the amnio, on both or just for Victoria. We were taken back by the question, on both? We thought the boy was fine, but he said that there was something small in his brain that was a soft marker for a possible genetic disorder like Downs, but the decision was up to us. I knew from our experience with Henry that it was likely nothing, so I didn't want to do an amnio and increase the chances of a miscarriage. However, I could see in Tammy's eyes that getting the amnio was worth the risk to her to give her some peace of mind that the babies were okay. So I acquiesced and agreed to an amnio for both. First, the doctor took Tammy's blood and then did the amnio on Victoria. It went perfectly, and the doctor showed us the vial with the amniotic fluid. Then, while looking at the position of the boy, we could tell that it was a much harder procedure. After thinking about it for a while, he suggested to not do it since he saw that we were both on the fence about doing it, and it wasn't worth the risk. We felt relieved, and we thanked him for his honesty. That night, while speaking to my sister about the appointment, but not wanting to tell family about the sex of the babies, we discussed possible genetic disorders that could be the cause. My sister was convinced that we were having 2 boys, but asked about the sex, since she told us that Turner syndrome, which only affects girls, was a very probable cause of the issues. Tammy and I played it off and pretended it was 2 boys, but after the phone call ended, I immediately started to look up Turner syndrome. At first, it looked like a terrible genetic disorder, but as I learned more, such as the difference between monosomy X Turner syndrome and mosaic Turner syndrome, I thought to myself, this isn't that bad, particularly for mosaic Turner syndrome. I saw YouTube videos of women living challenging but reasonable lives. I became convinced that Victoria had Turner syndrome, and although it was bad, it was something I could live with, and not something I would consider terminating over. As the days passed by, Tammy and I waited anxiously for the call from the doctor with the amnio results. When it finally came, Tammy called me right after, and I remember leaving a meeting to discuss. I was so nervous when Tammy started speaking, but I quickly realized that Tammy's tone was very joyful. She told me that the doctor said all the chromosomes were there, and they all looked good, so we could definitely say that she did not have Turner syndrome, Down syndrome, or any chromosomal disorder. I asked her then, what did the doctor think caused the issues? She said the doctor still cautioned that we were not out of the woods yet, and that he was going to send the samples out for a more detailed analysis to check for other genetic conditions. Another panel, he called it. Even though I heard this caution from the doctor, I breathed a sigh of relief and thought, this is going to work out, and we'll have 3 great kids. The news was perfect timing, since it was just before Christmas break when we heard the results. We were headed down to Florida that Christmas and had plans for a great reveal party, since my brother and his family were in town from England, and Tammy's parents would also be in town on their way to the Keys. Tammy and I got 2 presents, each with a baby outfit in them, one for the boy and one for Victoria. Our plan was to have Henry open the presents in front of everyone at dinner, so that he and everyone else could find out what siblings he was getting. Although, whenever we asked him, Henry, do you want a brother or a sister? He somehow knew and always answered, both. When the time came for Henry to open the presents, I particularly liked looking at my sister's face, since I knew she was convinced we were having 2 boys, and if one was a girl, she would be so surprised and be giving us tons of outfits from her girls. So we had Henry open the girl present last, and sure enough, everyone was shocked and so excited for a girl, except maybe her cousin Alex. I can honestly say that was the happiest time during the entire pregnancy. At that moment, we were a family of 5, as we were intended to be. The joyous Christmas break passed, and after our usual long drive home, we returned to a full mailbox. We went through the mail. We found a DNA kit for Tammy. We thought, that is strange. Did someone send us a 23andMe kit for Christmas? Not knowing what to make of it, we just left it to the side. The next day was Tammy's next appointment with the doctor. During the ultrasound, when we looked for Victoria's fluid sac on her neck, we couldn't see it. She had grown substantially since we first saw it, so maybe it went away. Unfortunately, her dilated kidney was now massive and so easy to spot. As the appointment went on, I started to notice that the technician was spending a lot of time looking at her heart. I could just tell something seemed off, and the technicians will never tell you anything, since they won't wait for the doctors to confirm and break the news to the patient. As we waited for the doctor, I just had this terrible feeling in my stomach, and I knew something was up. When the doctor came, he confirmed my suspicion. There was now a fluid sac around Victoria's heart, inside her pericardial sac that shouldn't be there. It felt like another body blow. I asked if the fluid sac had just moved from the neck to the heart, and he said that it was possible. All this time, we still didn't know what the root cause of this all was. I asked if he got the final results back from the embryo, and he said not yet, but they usually take a while. We asked him if the DNA kit we got was part of the test. He was perplexed by the question and wasn't sure, but said it could be and would be a good idea if we did it. At the end of the appointment, he recommended we go see a heart specialist at Sibley Heart Center. When we got home that night, Tammy did the DNA test and sent it back. When the appointment date finally came, Tammy was just about 25 weeks and already at what the state considered a viable baby. During the appointment, the ultrasound must have spent about 2 hours versus the normal 20 minutes taking pictures of Victoria's heart. When she was all done, we waited for the doctor as usual, with me pacing up and down the room. When he came, he started to describe the technical parts of the heart and what he was looking at and for. As he was speaking, I could tell his tone and his voice was not set for someone who was about to deliver bad news. In the end, he told us that yes, she had a fluid sac around her heart, but it was so small that he had a hard time calling it an issue. He said, overall her heart looks good at this point in time. All the valves look good, as did the chambers and the septum. However, he cautioned, doing an ultrasound on her through the mother had its limitations, and it would be best to do an ultrasound once she was born to be sure. Either way, we left the appointment that morning ecstatic. As we got in the car to drive to a celebratory lunch Tammy noticed that she missed a call from the prenatal doctor. He said he was going to call us to check up on the appointment, so we didn't think too much of it at the time. At lunch, we were so happy and talked about how we finally thought everything would work out now. We discussed more about how we would set up their rooms. When we got home, we noticed that Tammy again missed a call from the doctor. She tried to call him back, but he was with another patient, so he would call us back. Somehow Tammy knew something was up. So when we went to pick up Henry from daycare, and as we were buckling him in, we got the call from the doctor that changed our lives forever. From that moment on, I knew our family would never be as I originally pictured it. The doctor talked to Tammy directly as I dealt with Henry in the car seat, but I was listening the best I could to the conversation. I only got bits and pieces, but I could tell he was telling her a lot of information. When she was done talking, he told me the last test from the amnio came back, and the result was that Victoria had cardiofaciocutaneous syndrome, or CFC for short. It was something I certainly never heard of, and wasn't one of the afflictions I found during my many research hours on Google the weeks and months prior. The doctor told her an overview of several of the symptoms, such as issues with the heart, facial distortions, and failure to thrive, another term I learned. He told us to take the weekend looking up the syndrome and then schedule an appointment for early the following week. That weekend, Tammy and I looked up everything we could on CFC. Tammy even joined a Facebook group for parents of children with CFC to get a better understanding of what that syndrome is like. Me, I researched it like I was at work, researching the next new catalyst to a reaction. I looked for papers on specifics. Our doctor told us exactly what and where the mutation was, so I wanted to know everything I could about that specific mutation. All the while, in the back of my head, I knew that since this mutation was on a specific gene embedded in her DNA, there was no medicine that we could give her to correct it. The problem was systemic and could never be cured. The best paper I found was from CFC International, and it was the recommended guidance to pediatricians on how to deal with CFC kids. You see, since CFC is such a rare and relatively new diagnosed disorder, many pediatricians never heard of it and have no idea how to deal with a child with it. Children with CFC typically have many symptoms caused by their mutation. The difference in mutation, genotype difference in scientific terms, can cause symptoms or phenotype observations. To name some of the phenotype symptoms, as the syndrome's name suggests, cardio, such as thickening of the heart's muscles, problems with the heart valves, holes in the heart, essentially meaning Victoria's heart may be so badly damaged she might not live long, and it was very unlikely she would be able to play sports in any capacity. Facio, meaning her face would be distorted such that she would have a long face and coarse features. A face that I can now recognize in my sleep after looking at so many pictures of kids with CFC. She would certainly not be considered pretty or beautiful in any manner according to society today, but she would always be beautiful to us. Finally, cutaneous, meaning she would have dry skin, brittle hair, excessively wrinkled skin. Had these symptoms just been it, things might have gone differently, but sadly, there are many more issues for kids with CFC than the name suggests. Other issues include failure to thrive, meaning Victoria was likely to have feeding issues, growing, and would be short in stature. When I read these symptoms, each one hurt more than the next, but I always thought mental capacity was the most critical of all functions. I mean, look what people like Stephen Hawking was able to accomplish from a wheelchair. As I kept reading, then it came and it hit me. Kids with CFC were highly likely to have moderate to severe developmental delays and intellectual disabilities. I was broken. I thought to myself, would she even know who I was? What quality of life could she possibly have if she didn't even know who she was or who we were? All the symptoms were listed as moderate to severe, and most importantly, we couldn't tell if she would have all of these or just one. Tammy and I were completely distressed that weekend and every night after it. Our image of our baby girl was changed in such a way that even now it's hard to picture what she would have been like. When our appointment came the next week, we had so many questions for the doctor. However, since it was a new genetic disorder, there was not much she could tell us. Me being the scientist, I of course hoped for the best and most simple answer, that someone in the lab just switched the samples, or they were run incorrectly. But most importantly, we wanted to know was, how did our baby's growth mutation, the genotype, correspond to the phenotype symptoms we could expect in her, and how severe would they be? Only the geneticists could answer the questions we had, so first we got in touch with the lab that did the tests. Quickly we learned that the DNA kit Tammy did was to confirm Tammy's genetic code to Victoria's, so my hopes of a mislabeled sample was gone like that. Regarding our next question, sadly the lab told us they couldn't predict what symptoms Victoria would have and how severe they would be based on the mutation. I was immensely frustrated. I refused to give up on my objective answer. With the help of a friend, I was able to get in touch with a doctor who sits on the CFC International Board. Tammy and I spoke to her for about 45 minutes, and she told us that kids with CFC may not have all the symptoms listed, and there was really no definitive way of relating Victoria's mutation to a specific symptom or severities, at least not yet. While talking about her mental capacity, I distinctly remember her saying that kids with her mutation tend to be on the mild side. However, me being naive, I thought on the mild side of a normal kid, but she meant on the mild side of a CFC kid. Near the end of the conversation, I just broke down in tears. I realized that my attempt to find a definitive answer to her condition and who she would be had failed. Tammy and I were now left to decide her fate, our fate, and the baby boy's fate, which was that she shared the womb with, based only on the knowledge that she would have CFC, and statistically, it would be a moderate to severe case. When I started doing research on the possible conditions Victoria might have had, I thought to myself, what does it matter? It's not like we can do anything about it. On a normal pregnancy, you could terminate, but in our case, as far as we knew, we had a perfectly healthy baby boy in the womb with her. I couldn't terminate both just to avoid having Victoria. However, while researching, I learned that there was a procedure, selective reduction, the PC term, to terminate one twin in the womb while the other survives. Typically, early on in a pregnancy, doctors will recommend this for a woman with multiple fetuses to increase the chances of survival for the other baby. At an early gestation, this procedure is probably quite different than what we went through, for we were way beyond any simple procedure. Tammy was at 25 weeks when we got the news that Victoria had CFC. At that stage, she was already past the point where the state of Georgia would legally allow a normal termination for a single pregnancy. If we wanted to selectively terminate, we had only one option, to fly to another state, which allowed late-term abortions. Colorado was one of those states where Tammy's doctor put us in touch with a clinic that specialized in this. After speaking with the doctor from the clinic and reviewing our case, it was recommended that the procedure take place at 32 weeks of gestation, since it would give more time for the baby to mature to be a healthy baby boy. Thus, we had approximately 6 weeks to decide. I can't accurately describe the pain, anguish, and depression Tammy and I experienced every night from the day we learned of Victoria's condition. It was always the elephant in the room and the weight on our chests. Many nights I would just place my head on Tammy's belly to listen to Victoria's heartbeat and cry knowing that Victoria had been afflicted with this terrible syndrome. All of our hopes and dreams for her, her brothers, and our family now seemed tied to this decision Tammy and I now faced. As the days passed, we learned as much as we could about having a child with CFC. I felt I just couldn't bring myself to such a terminal decision without trying to understand what it would be like. So we went to additional doctor's appointments to learn about all the specialists Victoria would need in her life. We were blown away by the amount of appointments and care in the first few months alone she would likely require. We wondered, how could Tammy and I keep up while still caring for a newborn and a toddler at home? By far the most moving moment in our journey to understand what it was to be like was when we met a couple with a year-old daughter with CFC. Through the CFC International Organization, they made us aware of a couple, as fate would have it, with the same last name that lived no more than 30 minutes away. After a lot of hesitation and anxiety on our side and theirs, we agreed to meet up one afternoon. They also had a boy who was a year older than Henry, so as far as Henry and their kid knew, it was just going to be another awesome play date. As we pulled into the driveway, I could just feel the anxiety in Tammy and myself. We had told them our situation and that we were still deciding. How would they react to us being in their home, knowing that we might decide something different than what they did? How would we react to their daughter and seeing an actual child in real life with CFC? There were so many questions and emotions as we walked to their door. Maybe the sensible thing was to walk away. However, I felt I owed it to Victoria and myself to meet them and walk through that door. As we greeted them at the door and walked inside, I could still see the tears on the mother's face, even though she tried to hide them. I could only imagine how hard it was for them to open up to us and invite us to their home, to feel like their daughter and their life was on display for us to see and understand. Must have been an awkward and very emotional experience. Of course, for Henry and their boy, you would never know the gravity of the situation. They got on instantly, and he wanted to show Henry all his toys and take him outside to play with them. It was a joy watching the two together the whole time they were there. As we spent time getting to know them and the experiences they had raising their daughter with CFC, I was in awe of how strong they were throughout the process. Even though I could tell that having their daughter with CFC had taken an emotional toll on them, they still persevered through it all, and their ability to continue to face each challenge amazed me. I know that in addition to family and friends, they had their faith to guide them and support them on their journey. I heard this quote recently, and I believe it really does apply to them. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, and not lacking anything. James, verse 1 to 4. I thought, does it also apply to us? We talked about our similar experiences learning our babies had CFC while still in the womb. We learned about the many appointments they had to attend with their daughter after birth and wondered how we could possibly do that with another baby and a toddler. We heard of the many issues their daughter faced at each appointment and how their daughter had seemed to beat the odds at almost every appointment and be okay. After studying CFC, I could tell instantly by looking at her she had CFC, but that didn't matter. Just watching her doing things a normal child would do, like climb the stairs of their house or eating her blueberries, was a joy to see. Even holding her at one point made me wonder, what would it be like to hold Victoria? I know their daughter is very young and still has a lot of struggles ahead of her, as do her parents. However, when we left, I really did feel that they were blessed and was thankful that they had their faith to guide them. Even now, it is hard for me to think of an almost certain friendship Victoria would have had with her had we decided differently. As we got closer to the 32 weeks, we knew we had to make a decision. All the nights of talking about it, crying about it, and thinking about our life in either scenario had come to an end, and we had to decide. Or our decision would have been made for us. In life, we all have to make hard decisions, some harder than others. However, I don't think I'll ever make a decision harder than this. I truly believe that the decisions we make in life are a result of the influences that affect us, either subtle or obvious. My life has never been guided by faith like others I have met, but that isn't to say my life has been devoid of faith. For an engineer always looking for an objective answer, my faith faith is always going to be a hard thing for me to truly grasp. People like myself can easily point out issues they see with faith, but I have seen the good it can do, and the one great thing it can bring to people in life, hope. Throughout this time of decision, I often ask myself, how can I kill her hope if I don't know what to do, if I don't know what she will be like? And I struggled with that question the most, and in a way still do. However, in the end, my objective mind took over as I weighed the influences of our families and how different our life would have been after having her. I know that both families say they would accept her as she was, but I knew both would have a hard time with that. It hurt me to admit that to myself, but it hurt even more when I thought that even I would have a hard time accepting her as she was. I was afraid that I didn't have the strength to be her father. I'm sorry I failed you in that, Victoria. So Tammy booked our trip to Colorado to terminate her life. Tammy's parents met us out there, and my mother accompanied Tammy, Henry, and I as we flew out to Denver. Henry loved it and thought it was just another great trip on an airplane, while I cringed as the plane took off and I started to realize that this was actually happening. We had one day in Colorado prior to the procedure, and I wanted it to be a joyful day of traveling around like a vacation. It was the only family vacation Victoria would get. On the day of the procedure, Tammy and I took the car to the clinic by ourselves while our parents watched Henry. We had been warned to expect pro-life supporters out front protesting. When I first heard about that, I got angry thinking we would have to go through them to get inside and that they didn't know our situation or how wanted Victoria was. I learned about how the clinic had bulletproof windows to protect the employees inside who had previously been shot at. I learned about the founder as I read his biography, and I could see how he was a champion of a woman's right to choose. He is a man who risks his life every day doing what he believes is right, even though several pro-life activists have publicly called for his assassination. I couldn't help be in awe of his perseverance and humanity as he continued to help women in need. I have no idea what his faith is or if he has any at all, but surely the Lord would not put him on this earth and let him help so many women, if not for a reason. It is unreal to think that in an election year such as this, on such a hot topic as this, I had to think about the issue in such a personal way, since it has affected our lives forever. I do know one thing for sure though, both sides are right and both sides are wrong at times. Choice is not always something we should get. I don't get to choose away a lot of things in my life and have to learn to deal with it. And life is not always worth saving if that life destroys the lives of others around you. So I guess it will be an eternal struggle between the two sides then. And I suppose that is what it should be, since life is a struggle, and we hope that humanity ends up the better for it. As we got settled inside the clinic, we had several meetings with the doctor and the nurses and counselors about the procedure and our decision. They all knew our story and had sadly seen it before, but we knew we were a special case since they only performed this type of selective reduction on twins once a year. I knew that the procedure involved injecting the solution into Victoria's heart to stop it, and it was assisted by ultrasound. I also knew prior to coming to Colorado that I was not allowed in the room for the procedure. When Tammy first told me this, I was shocked and angry. I wanted more than anything to hold Tammy's hand and to talk to Victoria as if it would help. I tried to understand their point of view, since I'm sure it was a safety concern in case I go crazy. I thought and hoped maybe they would make an exception for me, since I would show them that I was not going to go crazy and I wanted to support Tammy and tell Victoria I loved her. Prior to the procedure, we had one last ultrasound together with the doctor. He wanted to examine her and make sure he knew her position in Tammy's belly. Under the ultrasound, it was so easy to identify Victoria with her huge dilated kidney that I never really thought about there being an issue with choosing the wrong baby. After looking at her one last time, we went downstairs into another part of the clinic. After some time, we had one last meeting with the doctor in a quiet and tranquil room. As I walked in, I could tell this was the last room for discussion prior to the procedure. After talking to the doctor and a little more, I again asked if I could be in the room with Tammy. Sadly, he quickly said that the room was too small and that it wasn't possible. Even though Tammy later stated the room was small, I think it was his way of saying nicely it wasn't allowed. So instead, I asked for a few last minutes with Tammy and Victoria so that her father could say goodbye. As I laid my head on Tammy's belly, I just cried. And I told her I loved her and that we would look after her brother who was kicking her all this time. It was the hardest goodbye of my life. Tammy then left the room while I was moved to another room with another nurse. I don't think there are words to describe the anguish and frustration I felt as I sat in a recovery room with a nurse I had never met before. I know she was just being nice, but it was hard to have that small talk, knowing that she was what was going on with Tammy all by herself. Although looking back, Tammy was the brave one and has a strength I could never have. After a little while, the doctor came and told me that the procedure went as planned and there were no complications. However, if I thought that stopping Victoria's heart by the procedure would be instant, I quickly realized that it took time. He said Tammy would join me soon and that they would monitor the babies until Victoria's heart stopped. So for 4 hours we sat, watched on the ultrasound, and waited for Victoria's heart to stop. First her heartbeat became irregular, then her heartbeat rate started to slow down and down some more, until finally the doctor said, no more cardiac activity. That was it. Victoria was no longer with us. All her pain and suffering she would have experienced throughout her life was gone, along with all her hopes and dreams. I wish I could stand before you now and say that I have no regrets about what we decided, but I have long known that I was going to have regrets either way we decided. It is nice to say, live life with no regrets, but we need them in our life. We learn from them, we grow from them, and we learn to cherish them. I know our family life is simpler now, here, without her and her CFC conditions. But I'll always miss her and wonder what our life would have been like. At the beginning of her story, I asked if she lived a life. Now, after hearing her story, everyone can answer that for themselves. For me, I'd like to quote Jackie Robinson. A life is not important except for the impact it has on another life. Victoria, your life had a profound impact on me, more than you'll ever know. I promise to cherish your memory, honor you, and make sure your brothers understand your story. I will dedicate all my marathon races to you and the CFC International Organization. I'll tell your story like I did just now, so that other parents in a similar situation might understand theirs better. Nothing will change the fact that you will always be my daughter, and you will always have my love. I will hold you in my heart until I can hold you again in heaven. I love you.
Powering on. Charging.
Take a look in the day that you blow out your candles, but
thank you all for attending. Please join us if you're here in person for a kind of like reception. Feel free to change and get out of your attire. We'll make it a joyful occasion. Thank you all for attending, especially those online.